I have told this story many times. My family knows it well. I've shared it with friends since it happened at camps and gatherings, in conversations under the rain. It's the first time I'm trying to write it down, so I hope you'll understand if it doesn't have the best structure in the world. Here it goes, just as it happened. I vaguely remember when we moved to an apartment in that small neighborhood in the center. I must have been around 3. My parents and older siblings did all the moving. And on one of the last trips, I remember they left me alone in the courtyard while they all carried the refrigerator and stove inside. It must have been very late because there was no one else around. The courtyard was completely dark, except for the small warm lights that barely illuminated in front of each door. I was playing with my Superman, a doll I never let go of, when a sound caught my attention. A muffled laugh, or a breath, or someone speaking softly. I couldn't quite recognize what it was, that inimitable sound with which I would later become more familiar. In the darkness, I thought I saw a face watching me. I called out to my parents and siblings, but no one paid attention. I suppose they must have been in the middle of unloading the refrigerator from the truck we had borrowed. Whatever was watching me from the darkness moved a little closer to me. I thought I recognized a grayish face, a human face with bright eyes, which disappeared in a second with a single movement when I heard my parents unloading. I didn't cry at that moment. I think I simply didn't know how to react. It was the first time I truly saw one of those monsters we all have nightmares about. I quickly made friends there. Some kids around my age. The same with my siblings. My parents too. And the kids my age, the younger ones, somehow knew that as soon as the sun began to set, our parents would call us. The slightly older ones stayed out a bit longer, but never when it got dark. As I grew up, I accepted these conditions, these rules, without questioning them. I didn't know why. I must have been about 8 when a friend and I finished playing in the courtyard. Some of the older kids who were coming back from the street began to chat among themselves, and we approached them. We felt grown up for a moment. This time they didn't send us off to play elsewhere, they didn't tell us to leave. They let us chat there with them. Until one of them, Eerie, at one point told us it was time to go home. My friend and I told him we wanted to stay there with them, and he said, "No, I'm not talking about you, it's time for all of us to go inside." It's almost time for it to come out. We looked at him confused. Gray hair turned into a paste from dirt, with grayish skin and bulging eyes impossible to forget. My friend laughed. Even at our age, we recognized what seemed to be a story made to keep young children from playing outside late. I laughed too, but I remembered what I had seen the night we arrived there for the first time. For the first time, I understood that it hadn't been a dream or my imagination, having never heard about it before. From that moment, it seemed that in every conversation among the older kids, this creature was mentioned. They talked about how they heard it crawling in the early morning if someone was unlucky enough to be awake, about how sometimes, only sometimes, it would slowly turn the doorknobs, perhaps looking for an open one. However, it never approached adults. And the kids in the neighborhood, as they grew up, became more occupied with work or school and stopped gathering there. They stopped talking about it, somehow losing it in their memory. I think that happened to me too. Even though, at around 14, I was hit with a surprising maturity when my younger sister was born, I always kept in daily contact with my neighborhood friends, even during high school and my first year of university. And just then, my 2 best friends moved away. They were only a few streets away now, but it was enough for us to start losing touch. And I thought about the woman who crawled in the darkness again. I thought about her when I saw her in my little sister's drawings. I saw her clearly. Well, as clear as she could be represented in a kindergartner's drawing. But the figure was unmistakable. The legless woman with dark skin and dirty hair. My sister had a problem that prevented her from speaking clearly, but as best as she could, she pointed to her window when I asked her where and how she had seen her. I searched in the darkness every day after that. There was no way I was going to allow this thing to scare my little sister. I remember throwing stones and seeing something move. I poured buckets of water and felt movement among the plants, but I never managed to find her. Weeks went by, and one night, while playing with my sister, my mom asked me to take a shirt to one of the ladies at the back of the neighborhood who mended clothes and such. It was one of the last apartments on the 2nd floor, an area I rarely frequented. It wasn't even 9 at night, but the neighborhood was already deserted. This time I felt her there. Somehow I sensed her gaze, perhaps. I slowly climbed the stairs, peering between them, hoping to catch a glimpse of her horrible eyes in the darkness. I walked down the hallway on the second floor, paying attention to all the shadows, not getting distracted by the sounds of televisions coming from the apartments. I reached the end, knocked, and handed over the shirt, trying to appear as normal as possible. When the lady closed the door in front of me, I regretted for a moment not asking her to leave it open, to watch until I got home. But I didn't, not because I didn't want it with all my might, but out of the embarrassment of asking for something like that at my age. That's what I was thinking when I heard a voice, a breath, a muffled laugh, a murmur. It was that strange sound I still can't describe today. Above me, poking her head through the ceiling right above me, was the woman with a now completely black face watching me, smiling, showing me her rotten teeth and her hair falling towards me. I never ran as fast as I did in those few seconds it took to reach my house. My mom says I never looked so pale. I didn't look for her in the darkness anymore, and I didn't feel comfortable hearing stories of her appearances, not even the ones from the kids, when these younger children, friends of my sister, started talking about the woman of the darkness. We moved a few years later and time passed and this memory began to trivialize perhaps. It became a horror story to tell my friends. Until not long ago, 1 or 2 years back, I was watching TV in my apartment where I now live alone in another city. I fell asleep with the TV on. I was probably changing channels because I was awakened by a segment from a show like Primer Impacto or El Rojo Vivo. One of those sensationalist programs so popular on Latin networks in the United States. They were talking about a bizarre news story. They were demolishing an old neighborhood in the city where I grew up to build a better parking lot. A macabre discovery had surprised the workers. Among what seemed to be a burrow built between the walls, they found the mummified body of a woman without legs.